Sometimes in the most banal and maybe strangest of places, we can find some profound depth that surprises us and hits us with a complexity that we might not have known. Such was the case when I read an article this week from the New York Times about the Fonz. For those of you who understand that, for those who don't, hey, Henry Winkler was featured in the New York Times this week. And in many ways, the surface of who he had become typecast as an actor, and then his career as well, was dispelled very quickly in reading about his life. The interviewer was trying to understand this actor in the wake of his recent success in a show that he began before COVID, but now is becoming quite popular again. And the interviewer interviewed Henry Winkler in his own home turf here, flew in and met him on the Upper West Side, where he grew up. And in growing up here on the Upper West Side, right on 78th Street, Winkler began to talk about what it was like to grow up in a home with two parents who had narrowly escaped the Holocaust. In fact, according to the story in the Times, his father, Harry, left Germany one day before it was too late, and Harry's brother did not make it out. That hair's breadth, that between death and life, between almost a part of those who perished and those who escaped, haunted Winkler's home. He told of how he grew up with a father who was merciless and a mother who was equally so, and how he lived an alone life and found himself only when he found West Side Story. And in its pathos and its music, he found his heart. He found that drama, and especially embodied drama, was a vehicle to express what he said were emotions that were too big for life. As someone who suffered with immense learning disabilities, dyslexia, he couldn't read and do math and barely graduated from high school. But once in college, he worked hard and applied for Yale School of Drama, where on the way to his I guess, what is it, an interview? What is it called? Like a audition, thank you, musician. An audition, he forgot the Shakespeare that he had memorized, the monologue, and had to wing it. But he did so well that he actually made it in. And I was so struck as he walked by the apartment building that he had grown up in on the Upper West Side and pointed out to the interviewer, oh, that's my house there. Right, that's where I was lonely there. Or that's the street corner over there. The topography of his pain, the trauma of his life etched into the streets that many of us just walk by each and every day. The narrative of his own painful past, acting as the backdrop for his very powerful present, as his celebrity was revealed at each and every corner. Hey, Fonzie! Hey, Mr. Winkler, Mr. Henry. He stopped to sign autographs and give some money to a homeless woman. His wallet opened and the receipts fell out, and the interviewer watched as this quite famous man ran around trying to grab up the receipts. And of course, in thinking about this, I read the article on Wednesday before I went to the reading of the names, the annual ritual on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to commemorate Yom HaShoah, the day of remembrance of the Holocaust, and reading the names after name after name in what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. My mind, of course, moved between the absolute overwhelm of it all and the absolute radical shutdown that comes when facing the unspeakable, the unutterable, the absolutely unimaginable that which defies language and poetry and art, that which extinguishes life, the immensity of humanity's capacity for harm and for hurt. I couldn't help but think, of course, about the repetition that is happening all around us, of course, in the Ukraine, and other relevant events seen against that past, and thinking about what it means when we say past is prologue versus past as possibility. What it might mean to imagine that walking by the same site where something horrific took place, walking by the same site where the unspeakable past presents itself to us. What does it look like to imagine a future and a possible way forward? Tomorrow morning in temple in the shul, we're going to be reading from the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. We'll be reading about the Yom Kippur ritual, the ritual in the ancient temple precinct that was given to Aaron. And we'll be reading about the unique circumstances in which Aaron received those instructions for the holiest day of the Jewish year, the day of forgiveness, the day of atonement. The Torah will tell us, Achrei Mot, after the death of Aaron's two children, his two eldest children, Nadav and Avihu, it's precisely that moment where the Torah contextualizes Yom Kippur within the context of a familial and public trauma. A moment where it's possible that Aaron, the priest, could have stayed down on the ground. In fact, in the very first moment when the Torah tells us this story, that's exactly what Aaron does. Aaron is Vayidom Aaron, he's silent in the face of this unspeakable, unutterable trauma. And he even protests to God and to Moses and says, would God be happy if I were to get up right now and start working? Would that work for God? And Moshe himself had to be, okay, you're right. But the Torah doubles back now, a number of chapters later, to say, after that death, here comes God onto the scene, and God gives instructions to Aaron in the aftermath of his children's passing. The Torah tells us, because of its fascination with them, the repetition of this primal moment of rupture, this sudden and unanticipated or announced event, the Torah seems to be metabolizing its own experience, as if the Torah is retelling the story, which will happen two more times. The most oft-told story in the Torah is the story of the death of Aaron's children. As if the Torah is itself trying to work through its own trauma, trying to somehow metabolize the shock and the inability to metabolize, to integrate this experience, because potentially it can't be integrated. And so God comes to Aaron and says to him, speak to Aaron and tell him, B'zot yavo Aaron el HaKodesh ve'al yavo b'chol eit el HaKodesh. Aaron, do not enter the Holy of Holies at every moment or on every occasion. The divine restriction on entry into the holiest of holies can be understood, of course, as an antidote to the sin of the two children who entered in their own way. And in that way, it's a perfect way. Don't do what they did. But on a conceptual level, it's actually much more powerful to imagine that God is coming to Aaron with good advice. You see that place of pain, Aaron? Go there, but go there in a particular way. Walk back to that neighborhood of your pain and do it in a way that is both close and proximate, but also distal and sufficiently distant so that you might also know how to go forward. Aaron is told to take 2 steps in his healing process. One is to be with it, in it, but not as it. Aaron is told in the language of our tradition to be an aid, to be a witness. And the profundity of witnessing is really that to be a witness is to be a withness. I'm with you in it. I stand and I bear witness, and I am with you in your trauma, in your pain, in your experience, because the greatest experience that a human being can have is the feeling that comes when you feel me and I feel you. And so Aaron, we're told, is to go into that holy place, but go in, but not always go in. Be close, but not too close, because if you are too close, if you are too in it, you will become it again. You must have that distance that comes with power, that comes with time, that comes with maturity, that comes with awareness, so that you might not then replicate it. Isn't that the scariest thing with things that traumatize us? Yeah. Not only going there, but thinking that if we go there, then it will be there and we will never go out of there again. That to enter into that space means to be trapped in that space, whether it's a memory or a relationship or a pattern or a community or a global phenomena. And so a void dance is the way that we dance around that void that comes when we don't walk into the holy. Terrified, understandably, scared. Profound to think that Yom Kippur, the day of forgiveness, is the day of entering in. But then the day after is the day that we leave. That we have some space, some power, some perspective that makes us able to be with it, because we won't become it. We won't get lost in it, re-traumatize, And so we come in and we say, I'm with it. But I am not it. In that way, as Thomas Hubble has written, an unresolved past is destiny that repeats itself. But in some way, being with it brings us to a point of potential and possible resolution. But resolution here doesn't mean that it's resolved. If we mean resolution, that it's finished once and for all, like a mathematical formula, that just we got it, resolved. Resolution is not tidy. It doesn't just end forever. Some things are unfinalizable, as Bakhtin wrote. Not every story has a happy ending, with apologies to Walt Disney and Hollywood. But resolution here might mean bearing witness, honoring the reality of what actually transpired, like Henry Winkler walking by that place, feeling it in all of its overwhelming absurdity, the full force of the disjointed and misaligned being that was felt. And then with that witnessing and witnessing, we're not left there because it's insufficient by itself. To ensure that the past does not become prologue anywhere means that a memory or a witnessing must mean that we're not it. We're not lost in it. We have resources, vessels, phone calls, newly found strength and power that might actually allow us to touch it and not touch it, as the Zohar says, mati velo mati. On a spiritual level, this tikkun halev is the capacity to re-enter those places we once dwelled in, the memories and the past that we once inhabited, the mistakes that we once made and those that others made to us. And with a witnessing, we might bring ourselves some forward momentum. It's hard not to think about that and its impossibility as we see our world yet again in a cycle of repetition, the sense that it won't ever change. I don't know about you, but I sometimes have some of those thoughts. Anybody here ever have that thought? It won't ever change? Anybody ever have that thought in their life? It won't ever change? Anybody ever have that thought, the world will never change? Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is the epitome of tshuva, the epitome of the possibility of change. And so how powerful it is on the week of Yom HaShoah, the week of Holocaust remembrance, on the week of that story, to remind ourselves that never again has always been a part of our national story. From the time that we left Egypt, it was never again Egypt. And not just never again for us, never again for anyone, because you know what it feels like. We are the people of never again. We are the people of witnessing. Atem eidain umadonai. God says, you are my witnesses. You are the ones who have the power to be with it, to hold it, to enter the holy, but not too close. To touch it and not touch it, to embrace it, and yet always remember that we have the power and must believe that we have that power to make things different. So I bless all of you this Shabbos. May you too be able to enter the holy. Know how much time to spend in that place and how it is that you know to leave it. That you have the power in you to know that with witnessing, you can change yourself and the world around you. May the one who blesses us with healing bring healing. And let us say amen.
Amen.
Please rise.